TikTok, time to rock. How's everyone doing? Gave Anthony all day to come up with a topic.
I never know what lie David's going to start out with.
So anyway, I have had some requests for just Q&A. So decided to go with a Q&A today. So anyone who's got any questions, before we even start off, why doesn't everyone tell me where you're watching from? You'll see Anthony has on his... I see you sort of leaning back, Anthony, so people can see
I did that now that you said something.
Your National Sarcastic Society shirt.
I should have an arrow pointing at you.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have Q&A. Why doesn't everyone tell us where you're coming from? And then any questions you might have about anything we've covered in our videos, questions about Islam, Christianity, anything else. And we'll go ahead and take questions for a little while, talk about anything you guys want to talk about. Again, we're here because Anthony came for a little visit because he wants to record some videos. My equipment is way better than his recording equipment, so when we want some really high resolution stuff. By the way, anyone wants to ever get Anthony a bunch of awesome new equipment so he can have awesome videos where he's from. And what do you record on? You record on like your webcam?
Yeah, I use a webcam or I use my cell phone. But one of the bigger issues is the lighting. I'm over there in it's my library, but it's a...
You don't have studio lights?
No.
You got nothing.
You
got nothing that you need. Now I tell people when they're getting started on YouTube, don't worry about equipment. Just because you can record on a cell phone if you need to. You can get a $20 mic that'll plug into your cell phone and give you even better audio. So you don't need anything sophisticated to get started on YouTube. But obviously, if we're posting stuff for my channel, it's got to be pretty good because people will complain about anything they can complain about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like if I'm recording, I usually record in 4K, but then I reduce it to 1K just because it's you don't need 4K for most stuff. But if I'm recording in 4K and making it 1K, and then you're recording in like 480, people will complain about that. Even though content is king and it's the quality of the content that matters, people will complain about stuff. So. Anyway, long story short, Anthony comes up here. I'll record all his stuff nice and professionally, and then we've got some awesome videos. Where is everyone from here? So let's see what we've got here. We've got North Carolina. I was actually born in North Carolina, Fayetteville. Indiana, USA, Candace, Virginia, Bacon123, UK, GK from Montreal, Rima, Vancouver, Canada, Columbus, Ohio, Malaysia, BC, Canada, Toronto, Quebec, Canada. A lot of Canadians. Ottawa, Canada. Why so many people from Canada? Seems like more people from Canada than the U.S. We got Washington State, Poland, Roanoke, Virginia. That's a couple of Virginias so far. Athens. Another Poland.
Trinidad.
Nigeria.
Texas.
Northern Virginia. San Francisco Bay Area. England. Trinidad. Gosh, it is late in England and Poland. It's the middle of the night there. Lebanon. Very
Japan,
late there.
Hawaii.
San Antonio. Seattle. The great state of Texas. Australia. Georgia. Europe. Seno Badua said, "Can you pronounce my name?" Well, I can sort of sound it out, but probably correctly, no. Portugal, Milwaukee, India, Paris, Texas, Albania, UK, Philly, London, Toronto, Stan, New Zealand, Texas. All right, so it kind of doesn't matter what time of the day we go live. People still watch from all over the world. I guess they're even in Europe or the Middle East, there are still plenty of people who stay up in the middle of the night. And so I guess I'm guessing that probably increases during coronavirus pandemic when more people probably their sleeps. I know my sleep schedule's off. I'm up till like 5 in the morning, and then I sleep till like noon. All right. I just saw a question about street preaching. All right. Wait, matter of fact, let me see if I can get this up on the screen. Because I have the technology. Wow, Israel, Indonesia, still popping up. Saved by Grace says Australia doesn't exist. You can make arguments like that for discussions with atheists to find out how skeptical. Yeah. Let's see where that question was. Question about street preaching. And then Rabbit Wolf said, "Help! I'm being held hostage in California by a group of megalomaniacal, power-hungry autocrats."
I was born and raised in California, so North Carolina, you have to account for David. California gets to celebrate that I was born there,
and that's where you were a gangsta. How good it. By the way, in case anyone's new here, Anthony used to be a professional car thief. So, how good were you at stealing cars? How long would it take you if you saw a car that you wanted to steal? How long does it take you from the time you decide you're stealing this car, you're right beside it, to actually driving off in it? What's it take? Is it like 5 minutes, or is it like...
It depends on what kind of car and how you're stealing it. Initially, when I first started stealing cars, I would steal cars with tilt steering. The tilt steering cars like Grand Ams, Cadillacs, that sort of thing. If you bust the steering column, it exposes the mechanism by which, when you turn the key, it's moving something. So you break the steering column, the outer casing, and then you pop out a ball that locks the steering wheel. When you know how it locks the steering wheel, you pop that out, and then you're able to just move the lever. So that could be a very quick process. Unless you're trying to be really quiet, you don't want people to hear, you can, do it real gently. But what I eventually started doing was taking people's cars out of their garages, and actually this is a lesson to everybody that has a garage. Ordinarily, when people park in their garage, their mentality is, we don't use our keys to open our front door. We only use our keys for our cars. So they just leave their keys in their car in the garage. And so a thief knows that if I can get into the garage, I can steal that car because that's where the keys are. So if you leave your garage open on top of it, all a person has to do is run up in your garage, open the car. And I just learned that when half the time when I go into a garage and open the car, I would hear and this is what, the reason I first caught on to this was because I went into somebody's garage, I opened the door, and I heard the noise going off. Beep, 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 beep. So I knew the keys were in the ignition. And I thought, do people do this all the time? And in fact, a lot of people do it. So initially, I would start stealing cars in a more technical way, and later I just started stealing them with the keys.
All right. So anyway, point was, ladies and gentlemen, you got to pay attention for people like Anthony. So don't leave your keys in your car, even in your garage.
I was 18. That was over 25 years ago.
I'm not saying you're still doing it. I'm saying as a lesson. Now they're getting the inside scoop from a thief before it ever happens to them, so they know what precautions to take. A lot of businesses and stuff do that, right? They won't just have some random security expert come in. They'll have someone who used to forge bank checks to come in and tell them how to spot, fake bank, checks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So now we have the stealing cars expert here. What a dirtbag. Anyway. We have, God bless you, David, what is your opinion on street preaching? I'm 17 from the Netherlands, and I will start street preaching. What's your view on street preaching, Anthony?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think people should be doing all sorts of things to engage non-Christians, get the gospel out there. But, you just take into account the context, where you're at, what you're doing. I know people, one thing I really like is somebody I know goes to Santa Monica, the pier there. They set up, I guess a lot of groups do this. It's in Santa Monica. This is in California. they have a mic that they're using, and then they have another mic that anybody else can come up to and ask questions on. So he'll say stuff, he'll present slides, he has his own little PowerPoint thing going on there, and over the years he's developed hundreds and hundreds of slides. So no matter what subject comes up, if somebody brings up Islam, he's got slides for Islam. If somebody brings up Jehovah's Witnesses, he's got slides for that. Doesn't matter what it is. And so he's ready for their questions, but he's also got all the equipment there that kind of gives him at least a visual advantage, right? So that's one thing. That's not exactly preaching, but it is. He's talking, and then he's giving other people a chance to challenge him, and then he'll respond to them, and that's great. It shows people that Christianity has the tools to respond to that sort of thing. So I think that's great.
Yeah, my view would be, whatever you do, do it well, right? If you're going to be a street preacher, then do it well, right? So make sure you got your theology down, and do it in a way that's going to stick in people's minds, so that whatever point you're trying to make, you get it into people's minds, and probably start watching videos of the world's best street preachers and start seeing how they do things, what questions pop up over and over again, and then I'm sure you'll learn quickly by practice. Nem here says, any debates on the horizon? You have one coming up. Are you still doing one here in like a week or something?
Well, so I am. I forgot to tell you, the guy wanted to change the date a bit, so he wants to do it on June 6th, which is a Saturday at 3 p.m. I don't know if that works for you.
It's coronavirus. There's nothing going on anywhere.
Well, I didn't know if maybe you had another live stream with somebody, some other character like Al-Fadi or something like that.
I don't plan that far in advance.
Oh, I know that. But so I have a debate coming up. I was trying to get Dale Tuggy to debate. Let me get this out there, on the record, because Dale Tuggy has this other narrative going on in his own mind for a number of people, at least his own fan base, that people are avoiding him. So Sam has explicitly challenged Dale Tuggy. He will not debate Sam. He had his excuses. I challenged him to debate. He has some other excuses. So I do have a debate coming up with a different Unitarian, very nice gentleman, lives in Czechoslovakia, is from England, so he speaks clear English and so forth. But
I thought you were about to say he lives in England, so he speaks English. I was like, what language did you think we were going to?
I mentioned that he's in Czechoslovakia. I didn't want people thinking I'm going to try and So we're going to debate. His name's L.J. Threepland. Yeah, that's coming up June 6th.
Okay, so June 6th, Unitarian debate. Do you guys do you have the official title?
He wants to debate whether or not the angel of the Lord is God according to the Old Testament, is Yahweh.
Yep.
So,
that should be a good one. So, that'll be here on this channel. June, you said 6th?
Yes.
June 6th. So, that'll be, and you're supposed to be debating Shabir, but we're kind of not sure how things are going to turn out with the coronavirus.
Right. I'm supposed to debate Shabir in California.
Yeah, I've been
September.
I've been asked to do a debate at the same time, but before I'm confirming anything, I want to see how things go out. I don't want to set things up and then it falls through.
Are you holding?
I'm going to wait a couple more months.
Are you holding off on announcing who it is?
No, I'm not agreeing to anything until a couple months goes by and I find out things are opening up or something like that. Here you go. Mihoville P. Why do I get Islamic relief ads all the time on your channel? Well, that's actually cool. You see, there's an algorithm. There's a YouTube algorithm for deciding where to put which ads based on who's watching and so on. So it's actually, people complain that they're getting Islamic ads on my videos, but that's good, right? It means that the algorithm knows that Muslims are watching my videos, and so it's putting Muslim ads because Muslims are watching my videos. So I think it's hilarious. And so and really, I mean, a relief organization, if they're actually using it to help people, I don't care. I don't care if people give to a Muslim charity, as long as they're using it for something good and not using it, funneling money to a terrorist group or something undercover. But I'm assuming these organizations are just, using it and actually doing charity and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, long story short, the ads come on my channel because Muslims are watching my videos, and the algorithm is sending Muslim ads for all the Muslims who are watching my videos. So it's pretty cool. Here you go. Melissa says, I understand why ex-Muslims go from a clearly false faith to atheism, but what do you think is the best argument to believe the gospel rather than being put off by any religion forevermore? So yes, basically what you have, ladies and gentlemen, is there are exceptions. There are exceptions. But generally, when someone leaves Islam, he either goes into the atheist/agnostic camp or he becomes a Christian. There are exceptions. Farhan Qureshi was one of. Did you ever debate Farhan?
No, we interacted a lot though.
Okay, yeah.
But I know it was surprising where he ended up.
Yeah, one of my earliest debate opponents, and in fact, actually, this Farhan was Nabil's first debate. The first debate Nabil ever did was against Farhan Qureshi, and I debated Farhan. It must have been somewhere between 5 and 7 times. So. And he was with the Muslim Debate Initiative, the Muslim organization, the Muslim Debate Initiative. He was one of the 2 American representatives. So they were Farhan Qureshi and
was it Shadid?
Shadid Lewis. And so Farhan eventually left Islam, but he got interested in like Eastern stuff, right? So he's interested in like Hindu Eastern religious stuff, so meditating and things like that. So, but that's the exception. Most people go the atheist agnostic route or the Christian route, and there's actually pretty good reason for that. If someone believes in, someone's a Muslim, is raised a Muslim, he believes in God, he believes in Jesus, he believes in the prophets that we read about in the Bible, believes in miracles, believes that God has sent people into the world and will judge the world and all these kinds of things. So if a person believes these things and eventually comes to believe that Muhammad's a false prophet, well, if he says Muhammad's a false prophet, then it's perfectly natural to say, yeah, but I still believe in God. I still believe in Jesus. I still believe in all these things. I now reject Muhammad. So there, it's quite natural for a person who still believes in God, still believes in Jesus, still believes in miracles to look towards Christianity. The other reaction is, wait a minute, come on. I've been hearing all my life from all these religious people that I'm supposed to believe all these things, and it's turned out to be a bunch of nonsense. Do you really expect me to jump to another religion where they're going to be spouting a bunch of nonsense as well? No, I'm done with it. And part of the reason for that is a lot of times the people who are exposing Islam might be atheists. So the people that Muslim might be listening to before he leaves Islam might be atheists who aren't just telling him that Muhammad's a false prophet. They're telling him, look, religion is a bunch of nonsense that's used to manipulate people and so on. So so basically the question is, what's the best argument to believe the gospel for someone who's leaving Islam? So if someone's leaving Islam and you don't want that person just to become an atheist, what sort of argument would you give? I would probably go with the resurrection. What's your view, Anthony?
Well, yeah, I guess a lot depends on the individual. I mean, if you're, depending on what their mindset is, one of the good questions that's always good to ask is what sort of evidence would be convincing to you for X, Y, or Z. And once you know that, now, of course, you have to evaluate whether the person's being honest, whether they know themselves as well as they think, right? And the answer they're saying or the evidence they're saying would be the most persuasive to them may not actually be all that persuasive. I've heard atheists, for example, say, if God made this bed levitate off the ground or whatever, I'd become a Christian. Then they'll turn around and say, well, maybe, this miracle was just a trick that Jesus performed and there were wires, And I'm thinking, well, why couldn't you do that with every miracle? But you claim this is what would ultimately change your mind. So it might take a little work digging to get at what's going to really work with this individual. But, it might be the predictive prophecy. If you know prophecy well, you can make a really good argument for Christianity. But you have to be able to show that what you've got in the Old Testament is something well beyond the ambiguous statements of somebody like a Nostradamus that some people think his quatrains are predictive in nature. You need to be able to navigate that sort of thing. But yeah, or the argument for the resurrection, or I mean, there's just so many things really that you could bring in there. I guess it depends what point they're really challenging, or where at, are they having trouble with the notion of God's existence? Is it inspired scripture? Is it a God who's actively involved in and with the world? So I guess my response would be dependent on where they're at with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would learn the argument for the resurrection. It is very important to figure out how skeptical someone is, because a lot of people, it really doesn't matter what the evidence is, and people are being pushed in that direction, to the point where lots of atheists are now admitting that no evidence would ever convince them, right? So Dawkins said kind of what you just said. He was asked, and I will have a video out on this probably this month, but I've been planning it for a while, just never got around to making it. But Richard Dawkins was asked in an interview with Peter Boghossian, what evidence would, if God existed, what evidence would convince him that God exists? And Dawkins said, well, years ago I would have said something like, hey, if I walk outside and I hear a big booming voice, Richard Dawkins, believe in me, or something like this, something like that. And he said, but I've come to realize since then that if that did happen, the more probable explanation would be that I'm hallucinating. Mm-hmm. And so these guys sort of went back and forth. Richard Dawkins and Peter Boghossian, both of these guys are atheists. And they got to the point where they were saying, look, even if we went out and there was a message written in the stars, Richard Dawkins, believe in me, we still wouldn't believe it. We would just conclude that there are powerful aliens who can do stuff. And so their conclusion is that even if God existed, there is no evidence that can show you that he exists. And my view would be, if you have a methodology that you could use to rule out anything from ever being proven to you, you got a problem with your methodology. And to give you an example, ladies and gentlemen, there are philosophical positions that are kind of similar, but on a different scale. So metaphysical solipsism is the position that I'm the only thing that exists. A metaphysical solipsist believes that he's the only thing that exists. Nothing exists outside of him. So as far as what he believes, he looks around and he sees a world out there, but he believes he's just creating this entire world to keep himself entertained. But the world out there does not exist outside of himself. It's just, he invents it, just like when you're dreaming. When you're dreaming and you invent a sort of world that you're in, he believes that that's what he's doing. And so he doesn't believe, a metaphysical solipsist, if he were talking to you, would not believe that you actually exist. He would believe that you are a figment of his own imagination for his own entertainment, because he's the only thing that exists. Now, if someone believes that he's the only thing that exists, and anything that he sees with his eyes or hears with his ears is just something that his own mind is inventing to keep himself entertained, what evidence can you ever give that person to show that he's wrong and that there isn't a world outside of him? There's nothing. There's no evidence you could ever give that person, right? Any evidence you would give to him, he interprets within his own worldview as he's just inventing what you just said to keep himself entertained, right? So there's no evidence you could possibly give him. Guess what? That's the same thing many atheists are doing. They just do it, instead of just doing it with themselves, they've done it with the natural world. And so if there were something beyond our world, they would never allow any evidence of it to count against them or to prove them wrong, because they would just interpret it as something within our world. So even if God wrote a message in the stars, they would interpret it as aliens made that message in the stars. And if God appeared before him and started blasting around lightning bolts, they would actually conclude, well, there's an alien that's trying to trick me into believing that God exists, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to fall for that trick. Now, Richard Dawkins admitted that. There are other atheists who have admitted that. Peter Atkins admitted that if he died and found himself before the pearly gates, he still would not believe. Right? So you have atheists now who are acknowledging no evidence would ever convince them. Guess what? I could tell that about them all along, right? I could tell all along that they were like that. Why? Because you see what they do with regular arguments for the existence of God. When you show the insane probabilities of the fine tuning of the universe or of life forming and so on. They just go, well, yeah, so what? It's clear that they're just going to reject the evidence no matter what it is. And so the fact that they're admitting it is cool, but I've always known that about them anyway. And so what you really find among at least certain atheists is that they've invented a methodology that is impervious to evidence while simultaneously claiming that they're just going where the evidence points. And so this kind of has to be exposed because their method is not what they're saying it is, right? Their method, even in that interview, Richard Dawkins goes, well, I've always paid lip service to the claim that one should go where the evidence. So now he's calling it lip service that he's always said go where the evidence points. Whereas now it's, no, don't go where the evidence points because you have to rule out evidence for things that you don't want to believe in. And so it's interesting stuff. What do you want to say?
Yeah, so this actually, I think it's just another way of expressing what's been true all throughout the history of philosophy. I think people have these views in terms of which they're excluding contrary evidence and only allowing into their thought what already comports with their position. But just to go back, not throughout the whole history of philosophy, but just 20 years ago, I remember reading Kai Nielsen in his debate with J.P. Moreland. So they were debating the existence of God, and Moreland's approach is very much like Habermas's approach, where he begins with evidence for the resurrection. So you'd have that difference, right? With somebody like William Lane Craig would say you begin with arguments for the existence of God, like the Kalam argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument, that sort of thing. And then you move, once you've proven God's existence, you move to the evidence for Christ's resurrection, and then from there to the veracity of Scripture or something like that. Well, Moreland was taking the approach that if you can show that Christ rose from the dead, then you have a good argument for the existence of God. And so he presents all this evidence. It was great evidence. But Kai Nielsen, his initial response is to say, well, I don't know a whole lot about the evidence for the resurrection. He goes, I don't know if it's as good as Moreland's saying it is. Mm-hmm. And he goes, but I suspect it isn't. That's his first response, right? He suspects it isn't. Notice the prejudice, though. He's already assuming, he said, I don't really know what the evidence is, really. He says, but I suspect that can't be true, right? All that stuff you're telling me. So it shows an extreme bias already. But here's the big thing that caught me. He said, even if the evidence is that good, and even if it shows that Jesus rose from the dead, it still doesn't prove Christianity. He said, we live in a strange world. It's a random chance world. Send it to Ripley's Believe It or Not. There's all kinds of inexplicable things. There's the Bermuda Triangle. There's Stonehenge. There's the, pyramid in Giza. There are all these unexplained phenomena. That's just another thing that we have to say is unexplained. But notice this. It's not just atheism. I also remember reading years ago medieval Jewish philosophers like Maimonides, and one of the things he said is he's trying to deal with the rapid spread of Christianity, and it's a kind of spread that goes well beyond what you see in the case of Islam, right? Here is Christianity growing by leaps and bounds against all odds, against suppression. Christians, in fact, Anthony Flew really marveled over this. He says for the first 4 centuries of Christianity's remarkable expansion, he says it was solely through the means of peaceful gospel persuasion. He says, by contrast with Islam, which spread by means of the sword, right? So he's saying Christianity spread incredibly fast and rapidly throughout the world through peaceful means in the face of severe persecution. Now, I'm not saying this is an argument I necessarily would use or that I wouldn't. I'm just saying that in the face of this, Jews like Maimonides wanted to account for it. And he said that he believes that God providentially was allowing the lie of Christianity into the world because he wanted to spread the message of moral monotheism and the messianic idea to the Gentiles in order to prepare the world for when the true Messiah comes. So it's just God kind of getting people used to the idea. So that was how Maimonides reasoned. Well, this was picked up by people like Pinchas Lapid, a Jewish rabbi, who said, as he looked at the evidence, and he's more acquainted than Maimonides was with the evidence, he looks at the evidence and says, yes, Jesus rose from the dead. And then he just ties it in with what Maimonides said. And he said, well, God must have done this in order to spread Jewish monotheism to the world. right? And they're not alone. I mean, there are other. I run across this all the time. There are either people who say there's evidence for it, but it's not evidence for the conclusion of Christianity. It's just evidence that we live in a chance universe, or it's evidence that God is trying to accomplish some other thing that falls short of, really pointing to the truth of Christianity. So that's why I say you got to take that sort of thing into account when you're dealing with people. People are not as neutral as they like to pretend. That doesn't mean you don't use the evidence. You should be presenting the evidence. You should be clobbering them with the evidence. You should be embarrassing them with the evidence. But you still have to realize, because I know a lot of people that just get frustrated, right? Like, why isn't this person believing? Why aren't they persuaded? And I'm thinking, I'm surprised when they are persuaded. But not because I don't think the evidence is good, but just because I don't think people are honest with themselves like they should be.
I still smile every time I see this. Name, Apu Bakr Al Puff Daddy. Dr. Wood, what is your view on Immanuel Kant? Immanuel Kant is actually, interestingly, I like the pre-critical Kant more than Kant in all his glory, because before what's called the critical turn, which he was on the old side to be coming up with completely new views. He actually had very interesting arguments for the existence of God. He had it's called the possibility proof, but he argued if anything's possible, then God exists. And so I actually did a paper on that one year in one of my philosophy classes on Kant. But Kant's massively wrong, but absolutely brilliant, right? You can be wrong and have it he's sitting there, you can have it wrong to where it's obviously wrong and stupid, and you can point to what's wrong with it. Kant's one of these guys who makes a system that is so obviously wrong, but so insanely brilliant in what he came up with that you look at it and it's got to be wrong. But what in the world is wrong here? So yeah, wrong, but very, very brilliantly argued. And he's one of the few people I can think of. It would kind of be him, and it would be Wittgenstein, where
had a massive impact on philosophy twice.
No,
what you're thinking? Oh
no, I'm thinking more along the lines of if they didn't come along, no one else would have come up with that.
Oh, okay.
Right, like other people, other philosophers, Descartes, Hume, Plantinga, any of these guys, you can look and see developments in philosophy to where if this guy didn't, step in there, someone else would have. It's like Isaac Newton and Leibniz, Gottfried Leibniz, both came up with calculus around the same time. Well, even if those guys never existed, someone else would have come up with calculus, right? Mathematics had just developed to that point where, hey, we have some issues here, and in order to make a move forward, you need calculus, and someone's going to figure out calculus. And so lots of developments in philosophy are like that. You can look, this person came up with this position, but you can look at what led up to that. In the case of Kant and Wittgenstein, these guys just, if they didn't put forward their theory, no one else would have put that forward. It would have never occurred to anyone, I don't think. Anyway, that's my view. But I'm not a Kant scholar, so I wouldn't want to say much beyond that.
I would say this about Kant that I do think is worthwhile. One of the things that Kant was doing was reacting to the fact that epistemology was in shambles as a result of the disputes between the British empiricists and the continental rationalists. You look at the field of epistemology, the empiricists ended up leaving things, reducing things to skepticism, and the rationalists reduced knowledge to subjectivism. And they were both trying to get at knowledge, and yet so Hume says, not Hume, Kant has that great line where he says he was awakened from his dogmatic slumber, right? So at least he's recognizing there's some issues here, and somebody needs to deal with this because these guys have just destroyed the field in a sense.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll just comment that what I was just saying, I'm talking about Kant's metaphysics and his epistemology. His moral philosophy is actually in a different category. His moral philosophy is is still one of the main one of the main moral theories. It's still you have 5, 6 dominant moral theories where virtue ethics and things like that, but deontology is right up there. Here you go. Anthony, is Isaiah 48:16 the best verse to prove the Trinity from the Old Testament?
Okay, so
yes or no?
Yes and no. No, I'm kidding. The doctrine of the Trinity, like any biblical doctrine, is something that's found throughout Scripture. So trying to pin it down to one verse and that sort of thing, I think, is problematic. Here's what I encourage people to do, and here's the quick thing that you can do, or the quick answer in a sense, is go watch the video that David has on the channel where I talk about the Trinity in the Old Testament. I have numerous videos on the channel. There's a whole playlist, but there's also one where I did a lecture at a conference on this. And I don't remember what the title was, but it's on the Trinity in the Old Testament. But what I do in that series, or it's actually 2 lectures in one. What I do is I point out that there are many things in the Old Testament that we might approach and wonder what they mean and argue, are these Trinitarian or not? But if you know what the first audience would have been thinking when they approached those texts, I think it changes the name of the game. And so here's what I mean. If sometimes people will balk at Christians who say the Trinity is in view in places like Genesis 1:26, when God says, "Let us make man in our image," or when God says in 3:22, "Behold, the man has now become like one of us," or 11:7, when God says, "Come, let us go down and there confound their language." That sort of thing is found numerous times in the Old Testament. Christians have always pointed to that as evidence for the doctrine of the Trinity. But now, is that a correct reading? Some people will say that Christians are being anachronistic in reading that back into the Old Testament. Well, everybody knows to ask this question when it comes to other passages, but they don't ask it when it comes to the passages I just mentioned. I don't know why. But we all know that you need to ask the question, who is the original audience? And in this case, the original audience of Genesis 1:26 is not Adam and Eve. Right? Adam and Eve, of course, it's taking place at the beginning. Nobody else is there, but not even Adam and Eve are there. What I'm asking is, who was the original audience of these written words? That's the original audience. The original audience is the Exodus generation, right? The Exodus generation. Moses is writing the Torah, the first 5 books, inclusive of Genesis, for the Exodus generation. Genesis is laying a foundation for Israel to know where she came from. This is where the world came from. These are your forefathers, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the promises that God made to them. This is what's being fulfilled now. This God has now come to answer those promises. And so that's the original audience. Now, what was their understanding of God? Now, it's too simplistic for people to say, oh, they just thought he was one person. That's not true. If you look at the Exodus account, you realize that God is saving Israel by means of the angel of the Lord and his Holy Spirit, right? If you just look at Isaiah 63 as an example of this. This is Isaiah the prophet looking back on Israel's redemption from Egypt. And what he's doing is he's saying, Lord, come back and redeem your people. Become to us as you have been in the past. Save us like you did in the past, because now we're languishing in our sins. And so, but notice how he describes the redemption from Egypt. He says, this is Isaiah 63, starting in verse 7. I will tell of the kindnesses of the Lord, the deeds for which he is to be praised, according to all the Lord has done for us. Yes, the many good things he has done for Israel, according to his compassion and many kindnesses. He said, surely they are my people, children who will be true to me, and so he became their Savior. So notice God is referring to Israel as his children. What do you call somebody in relation to those who are his children? A father, right? So here you already have the notion of God's fatherhood. But notice how it goes on. Verse 8 says, he said, surely they are my people, children who will be true to me, and so he became their Savior. In all their distress, he too was distressed, and the angel of his presence saved them. In his love and mercy, he redeemed them. He lifted them up and carried them all the days of old. So now you have a second figure introduced here, and it's talking about the Exodus, right? So you have the Father, the one who took Israel to himself as his children, and now you have it saying that he saved them by the angel of his presence. Two things to be said here about that. First, the word angel does not mean a created being. It might refer to a created being depending on the context, but the word just means messenger. It's used for God in Malachi 3:1. There it says of the Lord, ha-edon. It says v'melach ha-barit, which means the messenger of the covenant. It's referring to God as the one who established the covenant with Israel. So the term doesn't mean a created being of itself. It's just referring to the function that somebody's carrying out, right? So here it mentions the angel of his presence. That's the second point. This angel, this messenger who saves Israel at the time of the Exodus, is identified as somehow the very presence of God. Literally, it means his face, right? The angel of his face. Why is this messenger specified or singled out from others and identified as the very presence of God? You might say this angel is God with us. Sound familiar? In fact, if you look at Judges 13, where Manoah asked the angel for his name, what he says is, why do you ask my name? My name is Wonderful. That term is used exclusively for God in the Old Testament. God alone is wonderful and performs wonders. But there's one other place that it's used. In Isaiah 7 through 11, it's commonly called the Scroll of Emmanuel. It's a series of prophecies about the coming Messiah. Notice it begins by identifying the virgin-born child as Emmanuel, God with us, the presence of God. And then it gets into chapter 9, and he's called what? This is the name by which he will be called, Wonderful, right? So this name is applied to the coming Messiah. And in fact, the coming Messiah is also identified as God, the mighty God, right? Wonderful Counselor, the mighty God in Isaiah 9:6. Now, one more point here. The text in Isaiah 63 goes on. After verse 9 speaks of the angel of his presence, it then says in verse 10, yet they rebelled and grieved his Holy Spirit, so he turned and became their enemy, and he himself fought against them. So here you have it referring to the people that God redeemed from Egypt as people who were redeemed and somehow related to the angel of his presence and the Holy Spirit. They rebelled against his Spirit. Why is it talking about rebellion against the Spirit? Right? It's assuming the personhood of the Spirit and his deity. To rebel against him means they're opposing divine authority, and so they're becoming the objects of God's chastisement. So this is what Israel understood about God, right? When they're reading the book of Genesis, they're not reading it in a vacuum. They're reading it as the people who were saved by God, the angel of his presence, and the Holy Spirit, just like Christians, when they read the New Testament, are reading it as people who were saved by God, sending forth his Son, right, to redeem us from the curse of the law, and pouring forth the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, whereby we cry out, Abba, Father. We don't read the New Testament in a vacuum. They weren't reading the Old Testament in a vacuum. So they didn't read Genesis 1:26 and scratch their head and say, why is God speaking in the plural? What's this all about? Right? They understood this God is Father, the angel of his presence, and the Holy Spirit. In fact, the Spirit is explicitly mentioned in Genesis 1. So you don't even have to go looking elsewhere in the Old Testament to find already a candidate for whom God is talking to, right? So that's the long answer.
Is that your answer? Hey, check out this one by Fencing Mitch. I like this one, Fencing Mitch. Fencing Mitch in the super chat says, David, yesterday's discussion, you should name your pagan replacement video, I Can't Believe It's Not Paganism.
Can't believe it's not butter.
Flavored with pure monotheism glutamate. Now, I'm not going to name my pagan replacement video, I Can't Believe It's Not Paganism, but I will do a separate video called that will actually be a commercial. Right, so I need to. I'll make like a 1 to 1.5 minute commercial for Islam titled "I Can't Believe It's Not Paganism." Just based on that, I can already imagine that it's going to be a picture of the Kaaba with all the Muslims circling it, but instead of the Kaaba being there, it'll be a tub of "I Can't Believe It's Not Paganism," and so the whole commercial will be It'd be exactly like, wanting, I can't, but for those of you who might not be in a place where they have this tub of stuff called I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. Used to be a commercial in the US. I don't even know if it exists outside the US. But it used to be a commercial, I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. And so it's not butter, but it was so like butter that it was called I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. And so, yeah, that'd be an awesome commercial. I can't believe it's not paganism. So it has all the features of paganism, but somehow it's magically not. I like that. Christ Rules says, hey, David, I don't know if you will see this, but there is this atheist YouTuber called Logic who made a video on you, I think a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to see if you know. There are a lot of atheist YouTubers who make video responses to me. I've never watched a video by Logic. I do recall some of his followers a couple of years ago were posting random comments saying, Logic just destroyed your career and stuff, and it kind of reminds me of how Muslims act. But basically, guys, you have in this world very intelligent atheists who are arguing very carefully. They're trying to wrestle through the issues and the arguments and so on. And then you have guys that are basically the atheist equivalent of, the chest thumping, stupid religion, stupid, right? The dumb ones are the ones that, they go around posting on every video, you're just arguing your sky daddy's better than every other sky daddy, right? And it's clear these people have never had an original thought in their entire lives. Anyway, when people post a response to me, generally I ignore them. I tend to just stay on offense and not be focusing on, what's happening. If I'm going to answer someone's question or objection, it's usually, a question or objection from someone who's actually commenting on my videos. If I'm going to pay attention to someone else, it's going to come down to, if my first impression of your channel is your fans and they all act like 4-year-old children, I'm probably not going to be interested in responding to your channel. So if you think if enough people were to ever think, no, this guy's really great and he's making good points that you need to deal with, David, that would be a separate issue. If it's all a bunch of people who sound like little kids, I don't see any reason why I'd be terribly interested in responding. All right, prepare to be schooled, Anthony. Anthony, how would you respond to the Orthodox claim that sola scriptura is the mother of all heresy?
Well, that's a claim. So claims don't need anything more than to be denied. You need an argument for it. I understand. You're just, obviously you're asking a question here, and you're not able.
First of all, do you agree or not?
No, obviously I don't. Okay. But you have plenty of heresies originating within the context of the Eastern Church as well as within the context of the Western Church.
That's just silly, because even before people were proclaiming sola scriptura, you obviously had heresies.
And here's the other thing that you need to take into account. Sola Scriptura is a product of Protestants who broke off of the Western Church, right? The Western and the Eastern Church broke off from each other at the Great Schism. But so what I'm saying is, you can say the Western. This would be the Eastern approach to things, right? To say the Eastern Church is the original, but you still have to say that Rome is a schism from the Eastern Church in their mind, which means that Rome, which is not a sola scriptura, religion. A view of their approach to Christianity is not sola scriptura, right? They believe in the teaching magisterium of the Roman Church and as papal infallibility and all that kind of stuff. So they don't believe in sola scriptura, but they're a product of the Eastern Church. And then Protestantism would be a further product. So they're all, in a sense, from an Eastern perspective, everything comes out of the Eastern Church. So I don't know how it would even be true from an Eastern perspective. Besides that, who do you think the heretics are? Certainly, I'm not attacking the Eastern Church. Just remember, you're asking this question. But the early battles that are being fought are in many cases being fought in the context of the Eastern Church, right? The battle over Arianism and that sort of thing. So I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. You might want to say that sola scriptura is problematic and is conducive to this sort of thing, but you certainly can't make it exclusively responsible for that sort of thing, or somehow in a unique way or anything.
Here you go, Anthony. It's about to get real here. Alex Wood says, a question I would like to ask, what are your views on Calvinism? More specifically, predestination. Anthony, you Reformed Calvinist type who believes that real Christianity didn't come along till John Calvin.
Why pretend that he's asking me and not you? In fact, he's got your name. Why don't you own up to his question?
You know, I don't really have a view.
So I am Reformed, unashamedly Reformed. I believe that God is sovereign over all things, and that includes man's salvation. And I think Scripture clearly teaches that. But I also recognize that not all Christians hold that view. I would say that certain things are beyond the realm of being authentically Christian. I would say, for example, I would altogether reject Pelagianism, which is the notion that man can save himself. That's been rejected by the church throughout its history. What hasn't been unanimous throughout the church is, exactly what the relationship is between grace and man's will and other aspects of man's involvement. So there it gets a little bit more debatable. There are some versions that I would say are simply pagan and not Christian at all, even if they go under the name of Christianity. So I am Reformed. I believe that's the clear scriptural teaching, but I don't think that means only Reformed people are saved or something like that. I'm sitting with David, who can't make up his mind because he's.
Because you're trying to convert me.
I wouldn't have even put that question up there. That's all you. No.
Here you go. This shows you how far behind I am on these questions. This was from way back when we were saying where we're from. You said you're from California. I said someone mentioned North Carolina. I said I was born in North Carolina. But Hayden said, I thought David was raised in West Virginia Trailer Park. Was he born in North Carolina? Yes, I was born in North Carolina.
They were kicked out of North Carolina.
Actually, kind of. Actually, kind of. I was 2 years old. That's when my dad went up for trial for bringing drugs back from Mexico. He told me I was in my teens. He was talking about it. And he goes, yeah, and so I got found guilty of having 8 pounds. He said 6 pounds of marijuana. Anyway, like 2 years ago, I asked my mom about that. I said, yeah, Dad said he got caught with 6 pounds. She goes, 6? More like 60. So anyway, he was so he went to trial there. My grandfather, who was a Green Beret, but he knew the judge. And he basically got my dad not sent to jail, but the judge said, get out of this state. And so they moved to Massachusetts when I was 2. That's when they got divorced there. And I was 7 when we left Massachusetts. By this time, my dad was gone. So I don't ever remember living with my dad when I was young, except for like visiting. But I remember one time he kidnapped me and left me with some nuns. And I was like 3 years old, but I have images of like being in this underground place with these nuns on these little trampoline bed that they would put me to sleep on. But so I was 7 when I moved to West Virginia. So I grew up in West Virginia Trailer Park from the age of 7. So now everyone has the timeline in mind on the life of D. Wood.
Did I ever tell you how my family ended up in California?
Well, you're Italian. I'm sure you
so
were bringing the mafia there or something.
No. So, well, it doesn't involve this in a sense, but my great-grandparents moved from Sicily to Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. My...
Whoa! Isn't that where Vocab's family was from?
Yeah. Okay. So Vocab...
What's with Italians and
back east? They moved back east. Haven't you ever heard where the name Tony came from? They didn't know what to call all these people coming over on these boats, so they just looked at the papers, right? Where they stamped Tony on the papers to New York.
Oh.
And so they're looking at the papers. Okay, Tony. So that's where the name.
That's supposed to be a joke, right?
Yeah, that's supposed to be a joke. That's why you're laughing, even though you don't want to.
No, there was a little side.
I didn't tell it really well.
Little side story. Me and Nabil were me and Nabil were on a school trip, and we all stopped at an Italian restaurant. We ate Italian. It was like good Italian food. And there were all these Italians in there, and we were walking out. And we got to the parking lot, and there was like this Italian like wedding party there or something. But it was like this big crowd of Italians came out, and they're all standing there. And I go, "Hey Nabil, watch this." "Hey, Tony!" Like all these dudes turned around. "Ah!" Yeah, it was awesome.
So, my grandfather was named after Salvatore Tallacco. Typically, a Sal is known as Sam, so he always went by Sam. But so Sam Tallacco was my great uncle or something like that. But he was the original bodyguard or lieutenant of Lou Perello, who was the first head of the Cleveland Mafia. So my grandfather was named after him, but they were both gunned down in Little Italy in Cleveland, Ohio, by a rival gang faction. And so eventually that sort of stuff pressured my grandfather. The rest of our family stayed back east, but the family made him go west for various reasons. So that's how we ended up out there. But my grandfather was never officially a mob member, so I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that in the history there were these murky events and
Wow.
things.
And you ended up as a loser car thief.
And now I'm here with you. So
We got comments on that, by the way. A lot of people said they like you now more now that they know you're a car thief.
So I don't know if you guys know this, but if you haven't seen David's testimony video, excellent, awesome video. But I thought of doing something like that, but my thing was going to be, so you know that David, he's going down into the subways as he's telling his story and things are getting darker, right? He's getting further into the subway. And then as your conversion is coming about, you're also coming up out of the subway, right? So I thought what I would do if I do a testimony video is I get a bunch of people from my church to agree to loan me their car, and I would put them in different places across town. And then what I would do is I'd tell my story as I'm moving from one car to another, acting like I'm hot wiring it or something like that, right? So just like you did, all in one.
Just hotwire some cars and make it cool.
You,
And do it like Terminator style too, where you're like just busting windows and jumping in there and doing it.
nah.
You look, one lesson I've learned: you got to do whatever it takes to make an awesome video. I'll be like, oh, I can't get a bunch of windows replaced, or just go steal a bunch of cars.
That's what I thought you were saying.
Look, steal a bunch of cars. I'll be recording it all. We'll have some cameras rigged up on you. I'll record it all. You steal a bunch of cars, and then like the end is like cops showing up, beating the crap out of you, tossing you in the car,
And you saying, I got it all on film.
yeah, and then but you'll be like, and this is to remind everyone that your sins will catch up with you, and there is a future judgment. All right, and then you go into the car, and then you get locked up, and then you start a prison ministry.
And then
See, this is how I come up with. I told everyone I'm an unstoppable fire hose of good ideas.
Brilliant idea.
All right, I'm going to check some of the super chats here since I am way behind on the comments here. Shabazz Aziz says, I used to be Muslim, but Christ saved me in my dream, and I use many of your videos to help open my family members' eyes to the evils of Islam. Thank you, Brother David. Well, that's cool. That's why we make videos, so that everyone else has them, and then they have the information. Way more coming. AS says, both of you were jailed, now serving the Lord, breaking chains Muslims have in their mind. Paul and Silas of this generation, David Wood and Anthony Rogers. You know what's funny? Because people used to say that, like me and Nabil, when we would get arrested in Dearborn, they'd say, you're like the modern Paul and Silas and stuff like that. And I'd be thinking, what are you talking about? We're morons and losers, right? But then I would start thinking, wait a minute. Were the apostles just like, kind of jerks and stuff like that? But
behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, but we remember them as these awesome guys. Because I'm thinking, wait, you guys think we're like these awesome guys? We're like the biggest bunch of jerks I've ever met in my life. So anyway.
Yeah, you know, Paul and Peter were, making fun of each other behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was probably some major trash talking going on.
Well, I mean, we do know that they were real people, right? And they had real issues. You have evidence of falling out and things like that, and then reconciliation, right? Mm-hmm. Paul and Barnabas and Mark and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. They're not paper saints. The scriptures don't pretend that they were sinless or anything like that. And some of that doesn't even necessarily have to involve sin. It's just difference of viewpoint on certain things, like how we're going to do this, and somebody gets really stuck in their mindset. Like,
no, it is because I've noticed like a lot of the people that deal with jihad and really go after jihadis and stuff, they don't work well together. They don't work well together because it's kind of a certain personality type where if you are the sort of person who goes out and people are sending you death threats and stuff like that, you're kind of the person who doesn't like to take crap from people. And so that's great as far as dealing with jihad, but if people are trying to get you to work well with other people and you both have these personalities where you're ready to go to war over your disagreements, people tend to not work well together. And it's probably a similar situation with some of the early
the
leaders. It's probably, look, first of all, these are the kinds of guys who are, they're signing up for the Messiah because they think he's ready to come and just crush everyone, stuff like that. So they're signing on with Jesus because they believe he's the guy. But then, I mean, if these are the guys who really stick with it, and then you've got this other guy, Apostle Paul, and other guys coming along. Wait a minute, he's thinking he can school us. What are you talking about? So I can imagine having some issues.
Plus, these guys aren't chumps. Paul himself was brilliant. I read liberal scholars talking about Paul, and even though they're not coming down where I come down, they recognize his brilliance.
Anthony Flew, who's one of the champion atheists of the 20th century. So it was Anthony Flew and really a couple others. So you had Mackey, you had Bertrand Russell, A.J. Ayer. Those the big ones. But Anthony Flew, every philosophy of religion course I ever had includes some of Anthony Flew's writings. But Anthony Flew, after he came to kind of believe in God, he was asked, do you think you'll ever actually convert to a religion? He said no. But he was asked, could you compare Christianity and Islam? Because he spent his life studying both. And he drew 3 comparisons. He said it's hilarious. He said the Bible is an amazing work of literature, regardless of your background. Even for an atheist, you could read the Bible and find it an amazing work of literature. He said to read the Quran is to do penance. Right? For those of you who don't know what penance is, that's where you punish yourself for your sins. He said to read the Quran is punishing yourself for your sins. That is the most perfect description of the Quran I've ever seen. Then he drew a comparison between Jesus and Muhammad. He said Jesus is an amazingly charismatic figure, and everyone has to love Jesus and so on. Everyone wants Jesus to be on their side. And he goes, Muhammad most emphatically was not. But he also drew a comparison between Muhammad and Paul. He said Paul was a brilliant scholar. He had a first-rate philosophical mind. That's the phrase I remember. The Apostle Paul had a first-rate philosophical mind. And it was basically Muhammad was an illiterate caravan robber. And so it's like every way I can compare Christianity and Islam, Christianity wins by a landslide. And again, this is not coming from a Christian.
Yeah, and that went all the way back to Paul's time, right? I mean, I just pulled up Acts 26. Where Festus said to Paul, because Paul is, pressing the claims of Christ upon him, he's giving an apologetic. One of the things he does, by the way, and this points to
your great learning is driving you mad.
Yeah. But I was gonna, before that, Paul says to him, Festus, you're not ignorant of these things. They didn't happen in a corner.
Yeah.
So Paul is one of the things I learned a long time ago. I had a friend who told me. That I always keep in mind. He says you can have a good lawyer with a good case, a bad lawyer with a bad case, a good lawyer with a bad case, and a bad lawyer with a good case. Mm-hmm. He was just basically trying to give me the breakdown. So you could have somebody who's brilliant, who makes a great case for a bad position, and so forth. So, but what you have in the case of Paul is a great lawyer with a great case, right? He's got everything he needs, and he's able to prosecute it with all the skill in the world, in the ancient world. And so here he is coming up against the king, and the king is like, he's acknowledging Paul's brilliance. Your great learning has driven you mad, Paul, because Paul is actually arguing for something absurd, right? The resurrection. But the king can't do anything more than just tell him, you're insane.
What a compliment! And you can imagine what it would have been like for this guy, because there are people I would think of like that, right? Like there are people who, they spend their lives studying quantum mechanics or something like that, and they sound a little kooky, right? These like weird physicists and stuff like that, and so it sounded a little kooky with some of their ideas that come up. We'd be like, dude, you're so smart, you sound crazy. But that was like the criticism of Paul. Your great learning is driving you insane. So anyway, kind of a cool sort of backhanded compliment, actually. Bob Tom says, David, been seeing you a bunch. I still say Shroud of Turin, no normal man can be radiated on cloth. Yes, Bob Tom. And I still say, yes, I recorded an interview with Gary Habermas on that. So that will eventually be edited and posted. Michael M. said, oh my gosh, David, you got to make that commercial. I immediately stopped what I was doing to say this. God bless. Yeah, it's fun because I actually like making the commercials. And so I made one for, probably 2 years ago, but I think it was called Aisha, the Sharia compliant version of Alexa. And so the idea was you've got your Amazon Alexa, which, you can play music on and things like that. But in the commercial was an advertisement for a Sharia compliant version named Aisha, where it only gives Sharia compliant answers. Actually, you were in that video.
Which one? Oh, Aisha.
You were just his friend. You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. You were just you were just sitting there.
Yeah, I was like teller to pen.
And it was funny because Vocab was just, I don't want to be in this one by myself. So we're like, okay.
Well, so a lot of people don't know, and we, I think in that video that, she's not actually talking, right?
There's nothing going on. So that was dubbed by, that was my wife later. I gave her the lines.
Yeah. So I'm over there. I don't know what you're even going to fill in. I'm just kind of bobbing my head or whatever. And as I look at it now, I'm thinking I didn't have a clue what was. But it's funny.
Yeah. So later we had to add all the voices, but it was my wife, and I used like the robot effect on it, and I used an effect to make it sound like a child. Isaac Cruz said, David, how do you create so much content? It seems like you have a couple of videos per day. How do you find so much content to make videos on? Any advice on starting an apologetics channel? So that's a couple of issues there. It's basically, Isaac, it's for the past year I've been traveling a lot. Travel always, it throws off my schedule. If I get into the habit of doing something every day, then I just start doing it automatically. And going to the airport and heading somewhere else, it always throws off my schedule to when, even when I get back, I don't just automatically jump up and start working on something. Whereas kind of thanks to coronavirus, travel plans canceled. And so, you see me, as soon as I wake up, I start working on a video, right? Work on a video until I record the video, then post the video and so on. And some days I'm getting out too, just because, I finish my first video and it's 2 or 3 o'clock and I'm like, well, got plenty of time to make another one. So I just start working on another one. But yeah, I'm kind of to the point right now, and I'm kind of the point where as soon as I wake up, I start working on a video, do whatever I do in the evening. Sometimes we'll go live or something like that. But even after that, I'll be working on a video for the next day. And so just so you know, tomorrow's video, I believe the plan is, I think it's going to be called Muhammad's Only Fulfilled Prophecy, which it's kind of funny. Muhammad actually prophesied that tons of Muslims were eventually going to leave Islam, right? And that's what we're seeing right now. So you'd think Muslims would be running around saying, hey, don't panic about all these Muslims who are leaving Islam. Our prophet predicted it. He prophesied that all these Muslims are going to be leaving Islam and that we're going to have this avalanche of apostasy. He predicted it. It is in the Muslim sources that all these people are going to leave Islam. Why don't you see Muslims running around using this prophecy to vindicate Muhammad? Well, he said, when you see them, kill them. He said, so when you see them leaving Islam, kill them. So here you are. You have the best, most clearly fulfilled prophecy Muslims have ever had. Muhammad said a bunch of people are going to leave Islam, and we look around and we see a bunch of people leaving Islam, and they can't even use it to point to Muhammad because he said kill them. And so they're in this little problem. But I find it hilarious that that's the best case you could, because Muhammad said all this stuff that that can't possibly be fulfilled. It can never be fulfilled, right? So, for instance, he said, the end will not come until the people of Dul Khalasa run around their version of the Kaaba with their buttocks exposed and blah, 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 blah. That can't happen because it was destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. Muslims destroyed the place. That prophecy cannot be fulfilled. Unless you're going to say that eventually Dul Khalasa will be rebuilt as this pagan shrine, and then the pagan system will arise again. And you'd have to believe that if you want to believe it's going to be fulfilled. He said something like that a mountain of gold is going to be discovered beneath the Euphrates River and stuff like that. I mean, if Muslims took this seriously, they'd be out there looking for this mountain of gold. He said things like wealth is, people are going to be so rich in the future that no one needs anything, and gold is just garbage because everyone's so rich. Doesn't seem to be the world doesn't seem to be heading in that direction. So he said all these things that are obviously false. But the best case you can make for a prophecy of Muhammad is he said before the end a bunch of people are going to leave Islam. And again, it's just funny Muslims can't use it because he says kill them, execute them, chop their heads off. So anyway, that'll probably be tomorrow's video. Oh wait, he had more. It seems you're doing a couple videos a day. How do you find so much content to make videos on? I mean, if you think about it,
Islam is the gift that keeps on giving.
It keeps on giving. But yeah, it's basically a situation. Islam spent years propping itself up on a foundation of nothing but lies. We're the first generation that has open access to their sources. Meaning that, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, those were translated in like the 80s. Other sources are still being translated now. So the sources that you would use to refute the lies, we're kind of the first generation to have those sources. And so it's open season on Islam and going after the lies that they've been telling. And any topic you want to go to, if you want to go to so-called prophecies about Muhammad in the Bible, well, therethere's a bunch of them. You can make a bunch of videos out of that. If you want to talk about, Muhammad's character, well, you got tons of multi-volume collections about all the sick stuff he did. So there's like an endless supply of sick stuff that this dude did. So anywhere you want to go, there's just tons of videos to be made. And so I kind of just jump on whatever piques my interest for a certain day. And you said, any advice on starting an apologetics channel? Yeah. Decide ahead of time that you're going to stick with it even when stuff sucks. And what I mean by that is there will be a time, it's called, among people who've been on YouTube for a while, it's called your pain period. Everyone goes through it because you spend all this time making this awesome video and you put out the video and no one watches it. No one watches it because no one knows you're there, right? So the idea is, at first, you kind of have to fight for every subscriber, every viewer. You have to share them share them with everyone. Share your video with your family, your friends, get them to watch it. But going to be very hard at the beginning, and you're not going to be very good at making videos. And you can go to any popular channel, go back to when they were making videos at the beginning. Their videos usually suck. The difference is they kept at it. They kept at it, got better and better and better and better and better, and slowly built up a following. And so it seems like it takes forever to get like your first 1,000 subscribers, but then your next 1,000 subscribers is easy by comparison, because now you've got 1,000 people, watching your videos, whereas before, you started with none. So I would say that apart from things like that, I would say start watching some of the channels of people who focus on building YouTube channels, right? So there are channels like video influencers and things like that where they'll take you through all the basics. And by the way, me and John McCrae are planning. We can't do anything right now because of the coronavirus, but me and John McCrae are actually planning on doing something like that geared towards Christians and Christians who want to do Christian apologetics online. But we're going to be starting from the ground up, showing people how to do that. We'll eventually do that. In the meantime, learn everything you can. No need to reinvent the wheel. All the stuff that other people had to learn through pain, try to learn that ahead of time. And other than that, just keep putting out the content. Aim for, at first, try to aim for one video a week. Make it good. Even keep in mind, even if people aren't watching it then, even if you have no subscribers then, people will watch it later, right? So at first, if you have no subscribers, you make a video, no one watches it, don't think, oh darn, guess what? It's on YouTube, it's still there. So that later, by the time you make your 4th or 5th video and you get some people watching it, well, guess what? If people like your stuff, they're going to go back and watch your first video. And so if you keep cranking it out, I mean, and then if you're making your 30th or 40th video, keep in mind, people are going to go back and watch those other videos. So anyway, those are some basic points. But Jerry Mills asking for a William Lane Craig impression.
And then he asks about an impression of each of us.
Need William Lane Craig impersonation with or without cow puns, dealer's choice. Also, what are top impressions for each of you? I guess, no, I think he means, what is the top impression you could do? Does anyone do an impression of you? I don't know. In order to, it seems like to do a clear impression of someone, the person has to be a little quirky, right? Otherwise you just sound like a regular dude.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So if anyone doesn't know what he's referring to here, a couple of years ago, that movie, The Case for Christ, came out, and I went and watched it, and they had William Lane Craig and Gary Habermas, and these guys all have like very distinctive speaking styles. And the actors who were playing these guys didn't sound like them at all, which is fine. It's a movie, and it's not really essential and stuff like that. But, Gary Habermas, he has this, I kind of made fun of him, but I said he sounds like an apologetics Rain Man or something like that. He's always, gotta look at the data. Definitely the data. Gotta have 12 facts, because that's how he talks. And then Craig, my Craig impression actually, and this is why he talks about cow puns. The Craig impression, me and Nabil planned on doing this back when there was a show called Faith Under Fire. Lee Strobel had a show called Faith Under Fire. And after Nabil became a Christian, I said, hey, we should do a fake edition of Faith Under Fire and have it William Lane Craig versus the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Because Nabil does this awesome like Indian accent, so he's going to be the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and we're going to have William Lane Craig debate him on Faith Under Fire. Now, the problem was Faith Under Fire was canceled, so it kind of became irrelevant, and then we never got around to doing it. But so in that, what the cow puns he's referring to here, so he's obviously heard me talk about this before. In the little video I posted William Lane Craig responding to the holy cow argument. Well, Lee, this is what scholars refer to as the holy cow hypothesis, according to which, so I just went like that. But in the original, I had a much longer recording, and I was like, this can't be a movie review. It's too long. So I cut out a bunch of parts. But one of the things that I cut out was William Lane Craig giving all these cow puns, because the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi argued he has no problem with Jesus rising from the dead as long as Jesus came back as a cow. And so Craig starts making fun of this, but then he gets into all these cow puns, and he was going, and all I can say is, where's the beef? I'm not moved at all. This is utterly improbable. And he goes on and on and on. He goes, and so I cannot believe this. There's too much at stake. And I don't know why, because a lot of people think that that's funny, but I was like, this is too stupid. And I cut it out of the video. I should have saved that footage. It would have been funny for
I think it was a good Habermas impression, but I think your Craig impression sounded more like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
That's how Craig talks, man.
I can't do it.
And he goes,
so.
number one. Craig's awesome. So is Habermas. Let's see. Marilyn Murphy. D Wood's mind is a scary place, but fascinating. I don't know what that's referring to, what we were talking about when that came up, but yes, my mind is a very scary place. Adarsh Abraham said, everyone needs to watch David's testimony video. Praise God. Yeah, that was actually, to give you guys, for those who haven't seen it, we actually got it one take first try, right? When we actually went down there to record, we hit record, we went through it. It was so distracting when we were recording, not most of it, but the part where we go down in that long tunnel. You don't see this on the video, but a crowd formed as we're walking along, and I'm saying all this crazy stuff. We're walking along, people see the cameraman, which was just my friend. Well, he's a professional cameraman, but he's following me, and I'm sitting there talking, and we walk by people, and they hear this crazy stuff, and they start following us, right? And so we're down in the tunnel, and there's actually a crowd behind the camera, and I'm talking, and I know a lot of these people didn't hear what I said. They're not going to be around for stuff later on, but it was insanely distracting that there's this crowd of people in front of me sitting there going, huh? Right? And so I was getting annoyed. I wanted to just scream at them and say, mind your own business, get out of my face. and then go start over. But I kind of kept at it, and then by the time we got on the subway, they had dispersed. But it was so distracting that I did not know if I was speaking coherently at all. We got to the end. We sat down. We finished recording. I'm sure I probably have this somewhere. I probably saved this footage. But the camera guy says cut, and I go, "What'd y'all think?" And they go, "Oh, we thought it was awesome." And I go, "I think it sucked." I felt like it sucked. I felt like it was. I was so enraged by this and thinking, I don't know what I said, right? And so it was kind of just, if I just did all of that and then I have to go home and watch it, and then if I find out that I didn't make any sense and I was just, sounding like a complete idiot because I was so distracted by these people, that then I have to go back down there. We have to go record it all again and go through all that again. So I was like enraged. I thought it sucked. And they're like, no, it was good. And so anyway, we got home, and actually it was 34 minutes long. It felt like 15 minutes. If I'd known it was 34 minutes long, I would have said, nope, let's go do it again, and we gotta move faster.
Huh. Yeah. And you were also walking through the subway, singing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's just a bunch of things, which is kind of remarkable that you got it all in one take. There were so many opportunities for that to go differently when you think about it. So.
Yeah. So that worked well. So anyway, we recorded a whole testimony video on a train. My original plan was I was going to get through there, and once I got out, I was originally planning that I was going to be holding a mic the entire time and talking, and that when I got out of the subway, it was going to be Nabil there, and I was going to hand the mic to him, and he was going to start walking. But that's when he was traveling all around the world, and it was just never gonna line up. So I was like, all right, I just got to go ahead and record it. Let's see. Peter Milich says, here's my prediction for the next stupid defense of Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. She was born on a leap year, so when she is said to be 9, she's 36. I'm surprised they don't have leap year on the lunar calendar. I know you're joking, but I'm surprised that they don't make some argument, or I'm surprised that there's no common argument that based on, them doing this with this unique calendar, that it's actually way off and she's much older. MDS with the super sticker. Jo says, God bless you. All of us should be apologetics and polemics. Yes, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we are actually all commanded to be apologists in the Bible. Doesn't mean you have to be a full-time or professional apologist, something like that. But Christians in general, 1 Peter 3:15, are commanded to be apologists, in the sense that if someone asks you, hey, why do you believe in this stuff? You're supposed to be able to give an answer. Doesn't mean you have to, you're supposed to be prepared for every objection or every criticism or something like that. But if someone says, why do you actually believe in this? You should be able to give a case. And if you can't, watch some videos and start thinking about, what issues actually make you believe in Jesus or make you believe in God and stuff. And so think about those things so that you can actually present them if someone questions you. Because keep in mind, that was a command in early Christianity, but the impact that sort of thing had when Christians are going out and they're preaching in this context of, Greco-Roman paganism and philosophy. But if you asked your average pagan, hey, why do you believe this stuff? Well, I don't know, because it's just what we believe, right? There's no reason for it. There's no reason, just as what you're raised to believe in, and that's what you believe in as your culture. There's nothing you can prove. You're not going to sit there and, I will show you that Jupiter did this or that Zeus did this. There's none of that. It's just, these are the stories we pass down. If you ask the same thing to the Christians, you got a very different kind of answer. Right? The Christians were there saying, no, actually, Jesus' death by crucifixion, that was a public event. And we know that he rose from the dead because here are the people he appeared to. And they can testify to what they saw. And so it was a totally different. It was, here's what we're saying. You've got what you're saying, and you have no reason to believe it. We've got what we're saying, and we have evidence for it. And within about, 3 centuries, by the time you get to the 4th century, Christianity had permeated the Roman Empire and did so without shedding a drop of blood. Anything you wanted to add?
No.
Good.
Although
because no one likes you. Look.
Somebody did ask, why do you hate Islam so much? I don't remember who it was, but the assumption is, of course, so they're assuming that you hate Islam because you refute Islam, and I'm sure they're sort of smuggling in there the confusion between Islam as a religion and Muslims as people.
Yeah, Islam is just Sam. I don't always agree with atheists, but Sam Harris said Islam is the motherlode of bad ideas. That's an awesome quotation from Sam Harris. But gosh, how much time do you have, right? If you're talking about
it's like they don't watch your videos. It's not like you've been keeping it a secret.
Yeah,
right?
I bet I clearly don't like this, but I'm not telling you why. You've got this violent ideology that calls for the subjugation of the entire world, that forces people to convert, that says you have to be sentenced to death if you leave it, that is horribly oppressive to women, that tells husbands they can beat their wives into submission, that allows you to hire prostitutes to treat women as property, that allows you to take sex captives and rape your captives even if they're married, that where you treat your own wives like your own basically sexual property, right? Surah 2, that's what it says, that your wives are a tilth to you. A tilth is a piece of land that you plow. It says approach your tilths how you will, right? Which means do whatever you want to them. And by the way, that the historical context of that is that a woman was refusing to have sex with her Muslim husband in a certain position. She said, I'm only having sex in one position. I don't want to do it in that other position that you want to have sex in. This is brought to Muhammad. And the response from Allah is, she's your tilth, plow her how you want. So she has to do what you want and do all the things that you want. She doesn't have any say-so in the matter. Women are said to be stupid and immoral. Their testimony is only half as valuable as a man's. You look at the commands for Muslims to attack Christians, to attack Jews, to violently subjugate us. And the reason is because we do not believe in Islam. Islam calls Jews, Christians, and pagans the worst of creatures. So we're lower than dogs. We're lower than pigs, according to Allah. The Quran says that Allah has no love for people who reject Muhammad, who don't believe in Muhammad, but simultaneously says that Muslims are the best of peoples. So you've got this ideology which props up one group and makes everyone else horribly inferior and says you can treat them like garbage, you subjugate them, you force them to pay you money, you can take them as sexual captives, you can do whatever you want to them. And then, of course, one entire gender is massively, horribly oppressed in Islam. There's nothing good there that is actually doesn't exist elsewhere. And it takes all of this and combines it with being the stupidest pagan nonsense I've ever seen in my entire life. When you look at the stupid claims of Muhammad, that you have to eat this certain number of dates and then you're free from poison. You have to dunk your fly, and you have to pee in a certain way, and over half of the punishment of the grave is because of peeing improperly, and you have to pee while squatting, and all this nonsense that it's all wrapped up. And you look, and what this does is it just keeps people so busy doing all these stupid things that they never actually sit back and reflect on how stupid it is. And it does all of this in the name of God, claims to believe in Jesus, but reduces Jesus to someone who propagates the same stupid, idiotic, pagan nonsense. And you're asking, David, why do you hate this? How do you not hate this? Right? It's like the worst thing ever. I can't believe it's not paganism, but it is. All right. Anyway, hope that answered your question. Magic Man says atheists are having a hard time to believe in God because atheists falsely believe that God is like a genie that serves and fulfills human wishes. There is an element of truth to that, namely that lots of atheists are thinking of God as a kind of like superhero. And why isn't God rushing in and doing this? Why isn't God rushing in and doing that? As opposed to the one who is upholding and sustaining us in existence every moment that we exist. You know what I mean? So as opposed to God being sort of the foundation and basis of all reality, they're thinking of God as like, the superhero. Why isn't God rushing in and saving my grandma from this happening or helping me through this problem? And he didn't do this for me, so I'm just going to toss him aside. He's not a good genie.
And there are people that profess to be Christian who do think that way, right? I mean, you've got those who think God is a cosmic bellhop. They ring a bell and he's rushing to do whatever their current desire is. But that's not what the Bible teaches. However, that is what the Islamic sources teach when it comes to Allah, at least with respect to Muhammad, right? Allah basically seems to exist to satisfy Muhammad's desires. So, but Christianity certainly doesn't teach that. The God of the Bible is sovereign. He's not aloof. He hears the cries of his people, but at the same time, he's working out his sovereign will in history, and that means that many of the things that are happening aren't going to be clear to us in terms of their overall reason why until history reaches its climax.
Magic Man said, please make a video about Muhammad's morals. I've made a lot of videos about Muhammad's morals. That Muhammad is supposed to be a prophet, therefore should have a higher standard of morals than regular man, yet his morals is much backwards than the laws of the kuffar. Yeah, guys, just to clarify on all these issues, because Muslims often make this mistake of thinking that prophets are supposed to be these wonderful characters, right? These wonderful figures who don't do anything wrong. And biblically, the prophets are doing some messed up, horrible stuff a lot of the time. So biblically, God takes messed up individuals and uses them, right? There is not this tremendously exalted picture of prophets to where there's these virtually sinless people like we find many Muslims thinking. So that's one issue. The difference with Muhammad is that Muhammad is laid out as the pattern of conduct for Muslims. That's my objection, right? So if Muhammad were just a messed up prophet and the Quran were condemning him, in other words, if Muhammad had married a 9-year-old girl and then God had come along later and said, hey, you married a 9-year-old girl, you sick, messed up individual. Stop doing that. Let everyone know they can't do that. And you go out and preach this message. That would be fine. But all the Quran does is affirm all these sick things that Muhammad is doing. And here's what I find interesting, Anthony. Muslims will go, and I've seen Adnan Rashid do this. We can't believe in the Bible because it says that Lot had sex with his daughters. Mm-hmm. And they don't recognize Lot's not a prophet in the Bible, right? He's Abraham's nephew. That's it, right? And there's a point to all that story about good people going and mixing with the worst people in the world and the impact this is having on them and on future generations. There's a message there. Muslims just wipe it all out. No, I can't believe that sort of sick thing would happen, that bad thing would happen. But the more they do this, they say they're throwing out all these stories of all these prophets doing these things. And they're only going to believe that prophets did all these wonderful things. Well, the better you make the prophets by selecting what you want to believe about them, the worse Muhammad looks by comparison. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're saying all of these guys, we're going to cleanse the stories of all these guys until these guys only did good things. And here's Muhammad, the sickest freak of all time. Muhammad doesn't look good by comparison. Muhammad now looks like the worst guy in the history of the prophet. He already does. But
and it shows a clear failure to really understand what's happening in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Just to take so Muslims will say that Adam was a prophet and Noah was a prophet, for example. But if you look and you compare Noah and Adam, what's interesting is that Noah in the Bible is presented as a kind of second Adam in a sense. Yep. When God places man in the garden,
you can actually line up the stories, right? And you get all these parallels.
And that's just one of many. But here's the point. The point is that so God places Adam in a perfect situation in the garden, and the condition for life is that he's perfectly obedient. Then he would have the right to reach forth and take from the tree of life and live forever. But if he, by contrast, disobeys, then he'll be subject to death, kicked out of the garden. All of his descendants will necessarily, reap certain consequences from that. But that means then that you need somebody else to come along and do what Adam was supposed to do and do it for the human race. And that's what God is basically promising in Genesis 3 when he says, I'll put enmity between you, the serpent, and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He'll crush your head, you'll bruise his heel. So whoever this descendant of the woman is, he's going to come along and destroy Satan, but in the process, he's going to be wounded in his own heel. Now, Christians ultimately recognize that's fulfilled in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. But before that happens, people are looking forward to it. They're anticipating it. One of the things that means, remember that when God cursed the ground when man sinned, he said that you're going to work and toil by the sweat of your brow. No longer are these things going to be easy for you. God made everything perfect. It was all easy for man. Now it's going to be with much labor, toil, sweat, hardship, everything else that goes with that. So when Noah is born, notice what they're thinking about Noah. They name him Noah. His parents name him Noah, which means rest. They're looking to Noah as potentially the fulfillment of that promise. That's why it says, if you look at Genesis 5, it says they named him Noah, saying he will bring us rest from the work of our hands. So they're expecting this promised rest to come with Noah. And while Noah is portrayed as somebody who believes in God, Scripture still doesn't present Noah as sinless. In fact, it says in chapter 6 that while the earth was wicked and corrupt in his sight, it says that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. To even speak of grace presupposes that Noah is not perfect. If he's receiving grace, that means he's receiving unmerited favor. This is not something he deserves. It's contrary to his deserts. So Noah is selected out of that mass of perdition, of corrupt humanity, and God is going to save the world through him, right? And so, but then what happens is, God delivers him through the flood, him and his family. And then you have the ark coming to rest on Mount Ararat, on a mountain. And here's where people miss a lot of stuff. Eden was actually on a mountaintop. If you look at Ezekiel 28, it explicitly refers to Eden as a mountain plateau, if you will. And that's why all throughout Scripture, when you have the prophets meeting with God, there are often these mountaintop situations where Moses is going up the mountain. God is telling him to go up the mountain. And it's showing that, you have to go back into God's presence. And anyways, not to go into all that too much, but the point is that there's Noah comes to rest on Mount Ararat, and then he's in a garden, and what does he do? He ends up getting drunk by partaking of the fruit of the vine, just like Adam. It doesn't say he drank the fruit of the vine, but it does. There's a parallel there, right? Noah comes off of the ark, and he's in a new world, just like Adam was, and he sins by partaking of the fruit of the vine. And he had also been given the same command, right? Increase and be multiply, the same command given to Adam. But the point of this is, while they thought that Noah might be the person to deliver them from the curse, he turns out not to be. So he is a godly figure. He's not a perfect figure, but he's not perfect, so he can't be that final solution to man's problem. And so he becomes a foreshadowing or a type pointing forward to the true second Adam, who's going to come and deliver mankind. And that's what's happening over and over again with Old Testament figures, not just Noah, right? It's happening with all sorts of figures. It's happening with prophets like David, for example, who's foreshadowing the coming Messiah. So it's not like this is to no purpose. God is using sinful people to illustrate the need for a sinless Savior.
Couple more comments here. Let's see. Lisa Look says Jesus loves us. Ishka Bibble says, a Muslim told me that Muhammad wasn't white, he was red. I told him he was white with a tan. What's your take? Well, I mean, I often make fun of Muhammad for being the whitest prophet in history. That's in the context of, this idea of, how Islam was presented to African Americans in the 60s and 70s. Like, here's the guy you should go to if you really want to stick to white, convert to this religion. And they didn't have the sources, but now that we actually open the sources, Muhammad's followers were obsessed with talking about how white he was. So that's the context in which I'm making fun of how silly it is for Muslims to use this in appealing to people when this guy's all the Muslims did was emphasize how white he is. With that said, if we're not joking about this, then we got to keep in mind he's not like white European. He's white among the Arabs. But here's the real issue. Well, too. But so before I even say that, I have to point out that you do have some different descriptions of Muhammad in the sources. We stick with the white because it's just the extent to which they hammer this home by saying, the whiteness of his cheeks and the whiteness of his arms and the whiteness of his armpits and the whiteness of his shin and the whiteness of his forearms and the whiteness of his legs and the whiteness of his stomach. I mean, they're constantly harping on how white this is. But that brings us to the real point, namely, they were obsessed with this guy's whiteness, right? Why are they obsessed with color? Well, they're thinking in the Muslim sources, they think of color as dark bad, white better, and so they're constantly pointing out Muhammad is so white, he's so white, he's so pure. You go to the Bible, how many descriptions do you have of Jesus' color? They just don't care. They just don't care. You start having talk of the color of this vision I saw and stuff like that in Revelation. He's just trying to describe the what he's seeing around there. As far as the biographies that we have of Jesus, how many times are they harping on what he looks like? It's not the issue. Focus is what he was doing, right? In Islam, they're so focused on glorifying him that they have to praise him about everything. And because they're obsessed with whiteness as this good feature, they just want to praise every single body part of Muhammad for being like as white as it could possibly be. And so that's kind of the point of that. But if your friend's saying he's red, then say, okay, give us the source and show that it outweighs all these sources saying that Muhammad was the whitest guy in Arabia, whitest prophet in history. In fact, guys, I had someone who's actually a professional artist draw a picture of Muhammad for me, since this is Draw Muhammad Month, and here he is. All right. I've used that one before in a video.
Same picture? I'm just kidding.
That'd be funny. I should do that for because I think it's the 20th. Everybody draw Muhammad Day or something like that. I should just pretend I'm drawing the entire time and then hold it up. This is a white piece of paper.
Then you're going to have to be able to go into the background.
Saint Skanderberg says, we only got a few more here, and then we'll wrap up. Saint Skanderberg says, do you think Joe Exotic from Tiger King is based on the life of Muhammad? I have to confess, I mean, I have an idea that it's some dude who lives with tigers or something like that, but that's all I know, so I couldn't comment. You know anything about the Tiger King?
I don't
I don't know enough about it.
Huh.
Luke L007 said, do you anticipate even more embarrassing Islamic sources being translated in the near future? Yeah, we have the main Sunni Islamic sources available, but yeah, there are other sources with really disturbing things. Like, for instance, one of the stories you don't hear me commenting on is Muhammad sleeping with a dead woman, right? That hasn't been translated. That's from Kansal Umal, and we don't have it in English. So generally, I don't comment on the things that aren't available in English. But yeah, I'm sure once more sources are translated, and the idea there is it says he slept with the woman in her grave, but the Arabic for sleep is kind of like our English. You could say I slept with her, and it meant I literally just slept. I slept beside her. Or it can refer to sex. And so, yeah, before using some of that, I would want to see and would want to do a little investigating. But yeah, I anticipate more embarrassing stuff. Also, there's really cool stuff. There's really cool stuff that's going to be available. That's not necessarily just, embarrassing for Muhammad, but damaging as far as the lies that Muslims have built up. So I was talking to a Christian Quran scholar, and I pointed out something that I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but something that Nabil and I wanted to do, and this was like 2007 or 2008, so you're talking a lot of years ago, but back when we were starting debating, we had a couple of quotations from Ibn Abi Dawud's Kitab al-Masahif, which was this is by the son of the hadith scholar Abu Dawud. And so his son actually put together a work that is on differences among various Qurans. And so he recorded, some of the differences among various Qurans and so on. Never been translated. Nabil and I were like, we need to eventually get some money and have someone translate this. And so we never actually got around to it. But I was talking to a guy who says he said if I could fund it, he could put together a team of Arabic translators who will translate the entire work. So notice, all of a sudden, we would have just absolutely devastating evidence against the claim that the Quran's been perfectly preserved. So we already have devastating evidence against that claim, right? You've got people putting together Quran manuscripts side by side, just showing how different they are. We've got quotes in the Muslim sources that talk about entire chapters coming up lost and so on. But this is a Muslim work that is specifically geared towards that. This, and by the way, this is the source where you have, for instance, Ibn Masud saying that the Quran is only supposed to have 111 chapters, and Ubay ibn Ka'b saying it's 116 and stuff like that. That's in Kitab al-Masahif. So we're going to get that translated. I will probably find out how much it's going to cost, see what I can cover, and then do a fundraiser for the rest, let them go to work. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know if it takes 2 months or 10 months or whatever, but they'll get that translated, and then we'll have that, and we'll just keep going. And all these lies going to come crumbling down. I want to see that avalanche of apostasy. Cheryl R. also in the super stickers. Hindu historian says, thanks for showing me how easy it is to debunk Zakir Naik. It helped me see how ridiculous his claims about Hinduism are too. Yes, keep in mind, it's just a problem with Islam that their methodology has been geared towards find someone who can say something stupid but make it sound good to a bunch of ignorant people. That's been the Islamic method. Find someone who can say something stupid but make it sound good to a bunch of ignorant people. And they've ended up with their apologists, right? And it's funny because they're smarter apologists who aren't like that. They just don't do as well. The people who rise to the top are the Zakir Naiks, who are saying incredibly stupid, moronic stuff, but making it sound really good to ignorant people who don't know any better. But because Islam has been doing this for years, they kind of make it easy for us to come in and just wreak havoc on their claims. All right, one more. Eric Brown says, I found a miracle in the Quran. He managed to screw up so badly that he misrepresented every professing Jew or Christian. He said Jews say Ezra is the son of God and Mary is God. No one ever said that. Clearly, miracle is demonic. Yeah, and that is it's a problem with the Quran, namely that if the author of the Quran is Muhammad, I understand Muhammad making these mistakes. I understand Muhammad hearing Christians talking about the Trinity, hearing Christians talk about the Father and the Son, and hearing Mary, the mother of Jesus, and thinking, oh, that's what they mean by the Trinity. I understand Muhammad making that mistake. You could forgive Muhammad for making that mistake. But if God is the author of the Quran, I expect God to know better than that, and God to be able to actually respond to Orthodox Christianity. What do you think?
Yeah, and then of course the fact that he goofs when it comes to the Jews.
Yeah, Ezra.
I mean, where in the world does that come from? You've got at least an idea of where it could have come from, as an error, of course, but where it could have come from in the case of Christians. You just gave it, right? He hears the terminology Father, Son. He also hears Mary referred to as Mother. So if Christians believe in a Trinity, then it must be Father, Mother, and Son. That you at least have some accounting for, but where in the world does the notion of even the confusion of Ezra as son of God? I imagine it was just another bad mistake in reasoning, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe we don't know of any sect that believed that mm-hmm. of Judaism. Yeah. But maybe there's...
And in fact, when I brought this up to Muslim apologists, I think Shabir Ali said, it could just be referring to one person that we had no record of. Yeah. It's like, really? That's in the Quran? The Quran is responding? And the problem with that response is, it's not just the Quran, it's in the Hadith as well, where mm-hmm. Jews on the Day of Judgment are going to be asked why they claim that Ezra is the son of God. And so it's attributing this to Judaism in general, and we can't find a record of any Jew who's ever said it. And so it's very strange.
Why does Allah in his book, it's only 114 chapters, take time to discuss this belief of a single Jew? And of course it says Jews, right? Jews say. Mm-hmm. So he's not talking about one. But why does he have time in his book to talk about this insignificant minority of Jews but not address Jewry as a whole or in general. So that's just problematic. It's unwise, and so forth. But the Quran doesn't just get Christianity and Judaism wrong there; it gets it wrong all over the place, right? So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
And so Muslims have to hypothesize all these different groups that were teaching all these different things that we have no records of in order to justify the things Allah is saying, when you just have to wonder, why didn't Allah respond to what people actually believed, what Orthodox Christianity and Orthodox Judaism actually believed?
Yeah. And if the Quran is not really addressing Christianity, then why do Muslims still insist on interpreting what Christians believe about God in light of the Quran's false charge? I mean, every single Muslim does this, right? The Quran says that the Trinity is belief in three gods, the Father, the Mother, and the Son. I don't know a single Muslim that I've talked to who objects to the Trinity that doesn't miscast it as belief in three gods. It's like they can't admit that it's not three gods, otherwise they'd be saying Allah was in error. But if they're saying he wasn't really talking about the Orthodox doctrine of the Trinity, then why are they still stuck in that mindset, right? I mean, they still insist on interpreting the Christian doctrine in light of Allah's errant claims. So that to me is problematic.
Ishka Bibble says, how do we purchase one of your coffee mugs? If you're talking about this one, this actually isn't mine. Someone got me this. This was actually the team that records Al Fadi's videos. When we go down and do shows together, I showed up and they said they got me a One Punch Man mug. So yeah, you probably look up One Punch Man mug and get the same mug. Although I am thinking about making a mug that says something like Jihadi Tears or something on it.
I saw Hatun. I think she has a new coffee mug. Right, she has the.
Well, she has her giant one, and then she has her.
So the giant
she names
one,
them like Khadija and Aisha and stuff like that. Her.
So I don't think I had seen the giant one. If you must have seen it then.
You haven't seen her giant coffee mug?
No, this is the one I just saw.
I'm talking like this. You couldn't miss it.
It's the one. Is it?
She's got a coffee mug that is like this.
Is it the one with the picture of Muhammad on it?
No, I don't think so. Unless it's this big.
That's what I just saw. It's a big one. It's a big one.
She's got a picture of Muhammad.
Got a picture of Muhammad on it.
I would have to have someone draw a picture of Muhammad. I could put it on there. Ooh, and we could call it. It could say "Prophet Tears" on it. You're drinking Prophet Tears. Oh wow! I need a picture of Muhammad crying for a mug. And we have Happy Homeschool Texas. My Muslim neighbor is convinced Islam is true. I want to buy him some original sources for him to read. What should I get for him? We'll first find out if he's actually going to read those sources, because I mean it's kind of rough to hand him a 9-volume set of Sahih al-Bukhari and say, read this. So you might be better off going to him with individual passages, individual hadiths or something like that. But basically, if you go to the website, kalamullah.com, that's KALAMULLAH.com, you can download PDFs of the same, these are the volumes. So this is Sahih al-Bukhari here. This is, what volume is this? This is volume 7. So Sahih al-Bukhari in the English translation is 9 volumes. But you can download the PDF of the same collection, and Sahih Muslim and Sunan Abu Dawud and Jami' at-Tirmidhi and Sunan an-Nasai and Sunan Ibn Majah, all right there. And so what you can do is, anytime you're watching a video and you see me putting a hadith up on the screen, and you know it's from one of these, you can go to kalamullah.com. You can download the volume or just open it up and get the screenshot and get some individual hadiths for your neighbor to read. And that might be easier than getting an entire collection. With that said, you could always get a whole, and you could get this on Amazon or something like that. You could always get the entire collection of Sahih al-Bukhari and kind of go through and put some post-it notes in there on some passages that your Muslim neighbor needs to check out. But yeah, a lot of ways to go about that. But yeah, I don't know about just handing sources unless you really, really know that your Muslim friend would read them. All right, should we go ahead and wrap up here? It's 9:57.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I was just going to suggest that she could also consider giving him Nabil's book.
Yeah, that is, yeah. So
that might engage them a
yeah,
little more. Or they might.
You know your neighbor. So
Yeah.
you got to try and figure out what this person would actually read. If the person would read a book, yeah, I would recommend giving that neighbor Nabil's book, asking if ask your neighbor, would you read this? But yeah, I don't know. We'd have to know more about your neighbor to give you any advice beyond that. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we've been going 2 hours and we have work to do. Recordings of my awesome stuff and Anthony's awesome stuff. So we have to actually figure out what we're doing for the rest of the time we're here. I don't know what our schedule is for tomorrow because we haven't planned that out yet, but we'll let you know. All right, any final thoughts, Anthony, before I turn this off?
Nope. You erased all the.
I've said it all.
Yeah, you've said it all. You said a mouthful. Although Sheikh Khan, I don't know if you want our Sheikh Kareem.
What?
Sheikh.
Oh, that's just the comment. That's just where it scrolled to. Okay, we're gonna respond to Sheikh S. Kareem because
Yeah.
Anthony thinks we need to stop on this random comment here. So this is from earlier. This is just where this is all I'd scrolled down to.
I see. Yeah. I don't even know what they were referring to, but Sheikh Kareem wants to know how you're going to challenge Muslim scholars.
I just wanted to say, how is David going to challenge Muslim scholars about the translation of the Quran when they are fluent in Arabic and he probably uses Google Translate? I don't use Google Translate. I just use a bunch of translations of the Quran from Yusuf Ali and Halili Khan and Pickthall and M.H. Shakir and a bunch of other guys. But if someone's going to pull the stupid stunt, which I'm assuming you're expecting them to pull, oh, well, that's not what the Quran really means. It's saying something different in Arabic. We regard that as like a low-level coward's move, Sheikh S. Kareem. That is a total coward's move. And if I were really responding to that, I do have a video titled Why the Quran Was Revealed in Arabic, and it just massacres everything you're saying. But basically, in short, if a Muslim were to use that, oh, well, you can't know what Islam teaches, and I say, how is this a religion for all people? I'm on the higher end of educated people, right? I have 2 master's degrees and a PhD. I'm on the higher end of education in the West. If I can't understand your book, what good is it? What good is your book? Your book is useless. You've got a useless book. If even very educated people cannot understand it, your book is useless garbage. That's what I would say. And going, if I were, to spend a little bit more time, I would point out that according to the Quran, the reason the Quran was revealed in Arabic was so that Arabs would have a book in their own language and wouldn't have to go to other people wouldn't have to go out and learn another language to read the book of the Jews or the Christians. And so that's what's absolutely hilarious about all this. The things the ridiculous objections that you guys raise, if you actually thought about what the Quran actually said, you'd realize the Quran actually self-destructs with this. The position of the Quran is that all these different peoples already had their prophets and they had their own books. And the Arabs were the last people to receive a prophet and a book. Everyone else had their revelation and everyone else was supposed to go to their own prophet and their own book, right? So the Arabs were the last people to receive a prophet and a book, and so Allah reasoned that if they didn't get a book, they'd be able to stand before God and say, well, if we'd had a book like the Jews and Christians, then we would have served God better than they would, and they would actually have a reasonable objection on Judgment Day. No one had brought a book to us. And Muhammad has even commanded this, I'm sending you to preach to the people in and around Mecca, right? So this is for Arabs. So notice the reasoning here. You can't expect the Arabs to go to other people in other languages and learn those other languages to understand those books. They need a book in their own language. They need a book in their own language so that everyone can understand it. That's what the Quran says about why it was revealed in Arabic. What do Muslims say today? Oh, it's the only book and everyone needs to learn Arabic to understand it. You're saying the complete opposite of what your God says. Your God says the Arabs needed a book in their language so that they didn't have to learn another language, and therefore I gave them the book in Arabic. Now everyone has their book in their own language. It's total nonsense because you don't have these other you don't have these other books that line up with Islam in other languages. Even Muslims admit that now, so they don't realize that they're admitting that Islam is wrong and that Allah didn't know what he's talking about, that Muhammad's a moron. But So yeah, I would say something along those lines. I would say your book, if your book can't be understood except in one language, and these are the only guys who are capable of looking at it, then it's useless to most mankind. I'd point out all the people from the time of Muhammad down to the present who did speak Arabic and who thought it was complete, utter, total garbage. There's plenty of them, starting with the Meccans of his time. It's in the Quran over and over again. Muhammad receives a revelation. They go, these are just tales of the ancients. You're stealing this from other people. We know the guy you're stealing all of this from, right? So they thought his revelations were a joke. Islam didn't really start growing until Muhammad started promising people, hey, if you join me, you fight for me, then we'll go out and we'll divide up the spoils of war. We'll take all the stuff, and if you die in battle, great. You get to go to heaven and get all your virgins and spend eternity deflowering little girls. What a sick religion! What a sick religion! You think this is your defense of your religion, but it only works in one language. Well, great. It's useless. It's so useless. All right. More tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, one way or another. Catch y'all then.